planning and urban developments.
Thank you, Zibby. So, once again, we're here listening to and treating another story of a building collapse in Lagos. Now, this time it's in Banana Island. Now, previously we've experienced these building collapses on the mainland. Now they're coming to what is considered the haven of the super rich, the super elite, the 1% of the 1%. Now, it's interesting. Lagos State government within the space of less than 24 hours has come out with a number of statements. One, the Lagos State government has indicated that the building was unapproved. So it's indicated that from preliminary investigations that the collapse was caused by a cement mixer truck which rammed into building columns. Now it's clear we're not getting certain things right when it comes to regulating the construction of buildings in Lagos State. Now there is an agency required to physically test the materials. Now what I hear is some unscrupulous developers game the system. And what do I mean by that? They get the right materials for the physical testing. The Lagos State officials come, test the samples of the materials available on site. Those materials meet the approved requirements. Construction is given a pass mark, and as soon as they go and get inferior material. Two, it is clear that with some of these building constructions, there's no proper overall project supervision. And I know someone very close to me who recently bought a house for a pricey sum, and you need to see the nonsense that was done in the name of construction. And this was done by a reputable property developer. So the bigger question here is, where do we go from here? The former commissioner in charge of physical planning was induced or encouraged to resign. He's resigned. The new guy is here. And since the new guy got in, I think this is the second or third building collapse. Now, for Lagos State government, there are a number of questions. How did this building get to the seventh floor? And you're telling Lagosians, you're telling the world at large that the building was unapproved. At the foundation stage, were you not aware a building was coming up? At the first floor, were you not aware? And if you sealed it, how did construction continue? Who is the owner of that plot? Because if you say it was unapproved, then we need to start investigation. So first of all, who has the C of O to that plot? From the C of O, you can then get the owner and then get who was engaged to build. Now, thankfully and fortunately, officially, no one lost. There were no casualties recorded.
I think they say fatalities.
Okay, fatalities. Now, the staff strength of the Lagos State monitoring agencies has to be improved, has to be increased. It is clear that the pace of development in Lagos will overwhelm that unit, will overwhelm the agency. Two, have they started to embrace the use of technology in carrying out their work? Because Lagos, with its attendant traffic, makes it physically impossible to visit numerous sites on the same day. However, if you were to use a drone, with a drone, you can map out an area very quickly with a 2-hour overflight. You will then know what new developments are coming up, and then it makes your work easier, it makes your work smarter, it makes your work more effective. You can then go to specific spots and know what you're doing. So, Lagos State government, you have to fund your units better for effective monitoring and compliance. You have to continue and increase your use of technology if you haven't. And a clear message needs to be sent out to developers. Now, when 37 Jared collapsed, we were told that people were going to be taken to court, there will be criminal prosecution and all of that. It's been months after, I dare say almost a year. I'm not sure I've heard anything. They did indicate some officials of the Lagos state who worked with the relevant agencies will be disciplined.
Hmm.
We're not aware any of such disciplinary processes were even started, let alone concluded. But this is another collapse too many. And Mr. Governor, the buck stops on your table. Ultimately, you need to put an end to this.
Now, another report on the situation from The Guardian says NEMA says some workers are trapped in the building, but when we go further down that article, the deputy director of the State Ministry of Fiscal Planning says there are no fatalities. So fatalities means no one has been confirmed to have lost their lives,
Correct.
and casualties would be someone injured. But we're still hearing that people are trapped, at least from this article. Is it a bit conflicting at this point?
No, not necessarily. So you can be trapped under rubble, but
Mm,
not be dead.
right.
And when you look at the recent tragic earthquake in Turkey, there were individuals who were pulled out of rubble days after the event.
Mm.
But our thoughts go out to the people still trapped under the rubble, and we do hope that the rescue agencies are able to extract them safely.
All right, let's go on to some messages coming through via WhatsApp. Dami says the problem with corruption and institutional decay is that it cannot be limited to a certain section of society. Eventually, the issue of a few will become the problem of everybody as they stay on the streets. Okay. Mo from Ikeja says that's a great question and one we will never get an answer to. Who owns the building? The ownership of that building is directly proportional to the reason why the building went up to seventh floor without approvals. And Tonye says it's a shame, but we all know that nothing will happen in the building monitoring agencies. There will be a report, but there will be zero follow up, prosecution, and convictions. Okay, let's go on to the next story. You can keep the messages coming. 0809 And just moving on to the next article. This one comes from the Vanguard. Now, the Steering Committee on National Poverty Reduction with Growth Strategy said out of the 400 billion naira approved by the president for the committee to reduce poverty and enhance growth in the country, about 50 billion has been spent so far.
Okay, so okay, so the president in June or July 2021 inaugurated the steering committee to address poverty alleviation and growth across the nation. It's should I call it like a partnership project between the presidency and the governors. Implementation of these poverty alleviation projects are shared within several ministries: Ministry of Social Development, Agriculture, Health, Water Resources, Finance, and National Planning. And so far, 50 billion naira has been spent, which means that they have 350 billion unspent. The governor here says, notes that performance is quite low, and this is largely within almost a 2-year period. One of the things that I'd like to point out about poverty alleviation is typically when we look at how poverty alleviation is treated in Nigeria. Governments tend to go for what I'd like to call quick wins. Quick wins like the where they share money. So programs sort of like the trader money and market money. In some cases, for projects like the trader money and market money, for projects like the trader money and market money, those were supposed to be loans which the relevant persons were supposed to pay back. But looking back across performance, we can see that returns has been quite low and in some parts almost non-existent. I had a friend who worked on one of the projects to determine the implementation of I think it was trader money, the one that has less money. I think it was trader money, 10K a month. And from their findings, they found out that a lot of people who got the money considered it as a gift and weren't interested in paying back, because as far as they were concerned, that was their money from the federal government. So I believe that we need to move away from those kind of programs where we're giving people money, where we're lending them small money, to actually building infrastructure that can support people being pulled out from poverty. So when we look at things like improving access to farms, for example, improving storage in agriculture, so produce can be stored and last longer, farmers can, harvest their crops, move from the farms, move to the markets to reduce spoilage. All of these are the sort of things that will help to alleviate poverty in those sorts of communities. When we also look at things like water, for example, so water has been a huge problem, especially like in the northeast, yeah, with the drying up of Lake Chad. We look at how that has also affected arable farming, cattle rearing. So those are the sort of projects that I expect that government would focus on. Projects that wouldn't just necessarily put money directly in in the pockets of people, but will help them to create opportunities to be able to make more money for themselves so that they don't end up being dependent on the government. So if we look at all of this, like trader money and market money and programs like that, for example, ultimately, I haven't seen a report on the success or performance, but going by what we've heard in the media, also from what I'd heard from my friend who works on the project, we can see that the government is making a loss, because if people are not paying back the money, that money is not available to be circled and given back to other people as well.
Okay, I'd like to jump on what Gbubemi has been saying, and I agree with him. Now, trader money and market money were not designed to work. We had reports of state coordinators telling us months after the exercise that they didn't have the details of the people they gave the money to. So that's the first point. Now, you say you spent 50 billion naira to alleviate poverty in Nigeria. How come the effects cannot be seen? What exactly did you spend 50 billion on? There are no details. It's just we spent 50 billion. On what? How did you spend it? Over what period of time? So and I blame the journalists too. Someone gets up, tells you something as vague as that, and you don't press him further. How? In the UK, you cannot get away with such a vague statement, especially if you're a public official. It won't happen.
All right, let's go on some messages coming through via WhatsApp. Olu from Akala says, obviously, there is no oversight. There are no channels for citizens to make reports, and more importantly, there have to be consequences. Otherwise, the public will lose faith and interest. And Dami says, Mr. C, please don't encourage additional overhead costs for the Lagos state government. Commercial satellite images are readily available to map the entire state. Acquisition is simply another opportunity for some to rub their hands in glee. Yemi from Marina says, sadly, another building collapse in Lagos. It will really be miraculous if there are no casualties. In any case, we need to put a more reliable process in place. We need to engage these certain individuals to let government know when buildings spring up. They are everywhere and have wider coverage. We need to criminalize buildings going up without approvals. It's attempted murder. And Izehi says, with the incessant collapse of buildings, just imagine if Lagos was an earthquake prone location. Let's take a quick break. We'll continue the conversation on the other side. This is Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1.
So here's the thing, right? There's a consistent pattern of just taking money out of the treasury and filtering it away. You take it to dash people.
Hi people, my name is Praise, and if you want good
Generating
music, stay
any
tuned to
money,
Smoke
it's not creating
98.1.
any enabling environment, nothing. Then in 2051, some of us will not be here, will not be around. People are saddled with debts they know next to will not think about.
Cheating the future, honestly, especially in Lagos.
Lagos. Never changing.
Now, how do you need 53 million to
Never
disburse
changing.
747 million? Let's see things will make
Even though the
sense.
buildings have changed, even though
No,
things have
let's
changed
just
from
simple
old to
truth.
new,
Let it make
the city that
sense.
never sleeps.
So you're right about this journalism
Has it
because I
all
realize
in
that a
one.
lot of stories
Lagos, the
they
heart
don't
beat
answer.
of Africa. What's your dream?
You've got to
Congratulations.
so you don't answer
Yeah,
this
but you
question.
know,
They take you out for lunch first. Proper rest, 5-star restaurant. You eat at the end. No jokes. They arrange the envelope. Everybody takes.
All right, we're going on.
No, seriously, no jokes.
This is Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. We're looking at the stories making the headlines across the country. So get in touch and let us know what your thoughts are. The WhatsApp number is 0809 4440981. We're also streaming live up on our YouTube channel. It's Smooth981. And you can also tweet at Smooth981. From The Guardian, Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning is expected to spend $53 million from the $800 million that the federal government has secured from the World Bank. And this is supposed to help mitigate the effects of the petrol subsidy removal. Now, the ministry says it's spending 53 million on hiring staffers, office administrations, committee overheads, and other logistics as well.
Okay, so this is straight out of the realm of the absurd. First off, how do you take a loan to dash people money? Who does that? This $800 million secured is a loan that should be repaid by 2051 with interest. Now, the federal government claims it wants to mitigate the effects of the removal of the fuel subsidy program. But in all of this, there's still radio silence on why the state refineries are still not working and why they will not work in the future. Now, they've agreed to some nebulous, opaque arrangement where 53 million is set aside for the nonsense you were talking about, hiring staffers, office administration.
Those are
committee overhead.
tasks, Mr. C.
Zibby, according to the government, from previous stories on this item, the monies will be disbursed probably through accounts or physical cash handouts. So what office administration, what committee overheads are required for that exercise? Now, this 53 million, we're still going to pay it forward. Who are the people they want to employ? What are the numbers? What sort of qualifications are required to share money? They're sharing money.
The ability to count.
So they're sharing money physically or virtually. So what sort of, and why do you need an office for that? If you're going to share the money virtually, how big should the office be? How many people should sit in the office? Now they say training and workshops to share money. Why do we do this to ourselves? And then in 2051, a new generation of Nigerians who know next to nothing about this unfruitful arrangement will be saddled with the task of repaying the loan. I don't know who sat down and agreed this loan on behalf of Nigeria. And this is the sort of thing that is very sad. The $800 million is not to build infrastructure. It's not to create an enabling environment. It's not to encourage the business sector, the business side of the country, to generate economic and business activities that will increase employment, increase productivity, increase consumption. Rather, it is to fritter away money. And I dare say this is one of the avenues through which money has been frittered in the past. It makes no sense. And it's sad that the incoming administration is rather quiet about this. But we're here and we'll see how this unfolds.
Okay. National Assembly proposes jail terms for Ponzi scheme promoters, and this one comes from Punch. Now, the Investment and Security Service Bill for 2023 finally scaled through the final hurdle at the National Assembly when the Senate passed it on the 29th of March. Now, this bill is expected to aid the functioning of the capital markets and facilitate the ongoing economic diversification in the country.
Okay, so the bill seeks to repeal the existing Investment and Securities Act 2007 and to establish a new market structure and wide-ranging system of regulations of investments and securities businesses in Nigeria, especially in the areas of derivatives, systematic risk management, financial market infrastructure, and Ponzi scheme and platforms. Well, for me, the key pointer here is not even necessarily the proposition of jail terms for Ponzi schemes. It's the fact that these Ponzi schemes are so widespread in the country. One, two, the fact that people always seem to have money to put in these Ponzi schemes. When you hear the amount of money that people put, when you hear the amount of money that people lose in Ponzi schemes, my God, people have money in this country, and my question now is, okay, so it's not obvious, it's not necessarily that people really trust the Ponzi schemes, quote and unquote, because for most people it's driven by greed. They promise, large percentages and returns and all of that. But my question is, So obviously people are taking away their money from the traditional investment sources, the banks, investment houses, bonds, and all of that, and putting it in these sorts of things. So one, there's obviously some sort of gap that these traditional institutions are not meeting. And two, there's obviously weak regulation that has allowed people to be able to put in their money in all these fixed schemes. So this new act is welcomed. Implementation will be very key. But one of the things that I'd like to see is how will the SEC, for example, stop people from putting money in Ponzi schemes? Two, one, two, for people who end up, running Ponzi schemes, most of the time, all we hear is they run away. So there's so many people out there at large, they've taken these monies away. How do they intend to find them? So who are you going to jail if you can't find them? So I think the more important thing is to backtrack, you know, and look at the gaps in the market. So, for example, SEC needs to look at the investment climate, the investment environment, and be able to address the questions that people have. If people have so much money, with the last, I can't remember which company it was, and they said that the founder ran away with over 50 billion naira. If people and institutions had so much money to put in that kind of organization, you can imagine how, how much more money other people have lost.
But is it also possible that people are not aware that these fraudulent investments are actually Ponzi schemes? Because on the surface, some of these people who are now on the run present themselves as legit businessmen with investment offers for people who are just looking to stretch their money a bit further.
No, Zibby, sorry. Every victim of a Ponzi scheme is a thief and an armed robber. I'll tell you what.
Okay.
Yes, someone tells you bring 10,000 or 20,000 in 10 days. I'll triple the profit. How?
Could it also not be a problem
How?
of financial illiteracy?
No, they're criminals. It's the same thing you see in the churches. If you know you're not qualified for the job or you want to get it, say amen. And you see human beings saying amen. How? No, how? See, there's no business that generates 80 to 100% profit in the shortest time possible. None. There's none. So they know what they're doing. What they're thinking is, I'll be one of the few who will get in and get out before it collapses. So everybody believes we'll get in and get out before it collapses. And that's why I'm surprised they're wasting their time. You cannot prohibit greed. You cannot criminalize greed. Why are there so many Ponzi schemes? Because there's a huge demand for them, sadly. And so for as long as people continue to remain greedy, they will continue to fall victims.
All right, let's go on to some messages. I can't see a name here. Okay, Femash says our recurrent building collapse I saw in Nigeria as a whole is basically due to endemic corruption in our climate. The culpability on the part of the Standards Organization of Nigeria and other government parastatals is actually far worse than that of the developers. Take a good look at the quality of building materials in the market presently. A case study of iron rods will reveal that we're sitting on a time bomb if drastic measures aren't taken to sanitize the authorities who are charged with the approval and supervision of construction. And let's see what Yemi says. Yemi says, we are in trouble in this country. How can we share money enough to revive the refineries, build roads, set up industries, promote research, and create employment to fictitious and invisible entities? God will judge this government. Okay, on to Punch. The Nigerian Population Commission has indefinitely postponed the training of supervisors and enumerators at the local government level, and this is ahead of the population census that is scheduled to hold between the 3rd and the 5th of May, which is a few weeks away.
Okay, thank you, Zibby. So last week we took the story where the Federal Executive Council, in its usual contract awarding sessions, approved the purchase of equipment for the centers. And I did mention last week that if you haven't yet bought the equipment, or you're just approving the purchase of the equipment, when exactly are you supposed to train the people, the enumerators? And bang, we're here this week. Now, they say that it's been postponed due to, I want to read out the exact phrase because I just felt it was.
Due to some emerging issues?
Yes, due to emerging issues. That is one of the most irresponsible statements that will come out from a public official. What does that mean? You fixed the date so moto unilaterally. voluntarily. Now the equipment hasn't come in. This is the 13th of April. Now you've postponed, you don't even know when you're going to hold the training sessions because you don't know when the equipment is going to be bought. You don't know when the equipment is going to get in. Yet you then insult the collective intelligence of Nigerians by insisting the census will go on. Will go on with what? Are they going to be carrying notepads and pens and manually collating the figures or writing down the figures? There's a lot of rascality, there's a lot of mediocrity, there's a lot of incompetence in the public service. And the private sector isn't run this way. I shudder to think what someone in the private sector would I shudder to think what would happen to a private sector employee if he had a task to deliver on, he failed to deliver on it, and then when asked, he said emerging misuse, whether he would still have a job.
All right, we have just about a minute and 30 to go from premium time. The Federal Executive Council has approved the sum of 495 million naira for the installation of scanners in all the railway stations across the country.
Okay, so ostensibly these scanners will be installed to provide added security. Just like in the airports where you go through, have your bag scanned and all of that. Now, interestingly, I have been to 2 train stations, 3 actually, Lagos, Ibadan, and Abeokuta, and those scanners are already there. I would assume that they would most likely also be in Abuja and maybe in Kaduna as well. But for me, the focus of security shouldn't even be. This is a good idea, though. The focus of security, however, shouldn't just be the baggage scanners. It should be on the routes, because for the last 2 or 3 train occurrences that we have had, attacks came from the train tracks, came from the routes or the train tracks. So it's not necessarily about what people will take on the train. It's about the fear of who is going to waylay them, along the track. So I think that there should also be a focus on that. I remember when the Abuja Kaduna incident happened, the Minister of Transport at that time, tried to lay the blame on the federal government not approving some sort of security equipment along the road. And I'm still surprised that as of now, I haven't heard that those equipment have been ordered and installed. So I think those are the kind of things that they should also focus on and not just baggage scanners.
I just have a quick comment. Gbubemi has been to 3 stations. He's seen scanners already installed. What's this about?
Maybe for the other, not 3.
So
Just saying.
This story doesn't suggest scanners have been installed anywhere. So again, this is part of the problem with the Nigerian public service.
All right, quickly we'll go into some comments. And this is from Tayo. Tayo says, not all Ponzi schemes are due to greed. Bernie Madoff successfully deceived even the SEC over the course of several years. At that time, how much less regular investors? Kazim says, all right, Kazim, your message is a bit long. And Shegun says, Mr. C has labeled the victims of Ponzi schemes correctly. Dan Okuda says it's only in Nigeria that the government will borrow money to share to the people. And Toye says, I think everyone in government has become lazy with respect to solving problems. It's easier to claim to distribute money rather than coming up with real long-term solutions. How else will they be able to get more funds to distribute next year? That is all the time that we have this morning for Freshly Pressed. Thanks for listening. Thank you for your messages. And of course, a special thanks to our analysts as well, Mr. C and Gbubemi, for joining us this morning. You stay with us. There's a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.